take the lead on this panel, somebody I think is familiar with many of you, Joe Mandese, longtime editor-in-chief here at MediaPost, but also 4-decade veteran of covering the ad agency space, especially. Also the perfect man, especially for this. He has been hosting our own Upfronts events, which takes up exactly this question every year for the last 12 years. Please welcome Joe Mandese.
Thank you, Steve. Well, thank you for having us. This is my first hybrid event, as the microphone can attest. Normally I'm looking at everyone on the screen like you at home, but it's nice to be out here at Gurney's. So let me introduce my panel because we only have about a half an hour to get into this. And just one point, Steve pointed out that we talk about this every year at the Outfront, which happens in April, maybe May. So it's really, this is the earliest I've ever had to discuss the Upfront. I'd like to introduce my panel and then do an important disclosure. So all the way on my left, I have Ivan Stamenov, who's the Vice President, Marketing, Operations, and Technology for the Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And then we have Jason Kanefsky, who is the Managing Partner, Marketplace Intelligence for Havas Media and a longtime network media buyer too. So thank you for being here. So the full disclosure is, during the panel prep call, I learned that half this panel doesn't buy the Upfront. At least half this panel doesn't even buy network TV at this point. But that's actually a good thing because I think it's a meaningful, topical way to get into this discussion. I mean, we started the day off today with Cadillac talking about how they flipped their funnel. You know, I don't know how many people in this room realize, but the new season just started. And the reason the new TV season started every year this time originally had to do with the automotive industry because they would launch these new car models. And that seemed like a logical timing. And then from that point on, you know, markets emerged around it. Early on, the Upfront started really as development talks with major sponsors. There were only a handful of them. And they would vie to look at the network content being developed and buy sponsorship positions. And then over time, more and more advertisers came in. The structure of the Upfront began to evolve. But the reason I think this is very apropos, and I'll let Ivan explain his position, I just want to make this one point. When I started covering the network marketplace in 1983, there were only 200 advertisers buying network TV. For 50 companies, 200 network brands. By the end of the 80s, there were 4,000 brands buying national television because this thing called cable and satellite came along and made it more affordable and less of a barrier to entry for national brands to use TV. And the good news is over time, a lot of those newbie cable advertisers became big advertisers and the network marketplace grew. So I'm not going to ask this opening question now, but I want you to think about what that portends for the emerging CTV, ATV marketplace and that Fuster Luck chart that the guy from Cadillac showed this morning. It is a crazy marketplace and getting crazier by the moment. So just to kick it off, Ivan, why don't you do the full disclosure on how you view the network Upfront, what your position is in it this year?
Can you guys hear me? All right. So look, disclosure to disclosure, I'm kind of like presenting this contrarian view to Upfront buys, but just 2 years ago, need to, you know, kind of like reconsider their strategy and get to a point where, you know, there is and protect the revenues as well as the contribution margins, right? And that was a call where we, as being probably the third biggest budget in the organization, had to take a step back and sort of say, hey, look, is there a way for us to invest in more liquid media that does not rob us from the chance of pulling back should things actually go awry in this highly volatile environment? So that's why we kind of pulled back from the upfronts, saying, hey, look, there may be an opportunity down the line for us to actually rethink how we actually buy TV to begin with. And that was the case, right? So we not only pulled back from national TV altogether, but we actually ramped up our spend with local TV, mostly general market, but we also dabbled into direct response, right? So, and we were kind of balancing the general market and the direct response buy in a way that we are kind of trying to understand and forecast what the inventory would look like during a given quarter. Are we going to have elections? And if we do, are there any specific DMAs that will be impacted with these elections, given that they are actually contested markets, right? So that was the sort of like thought we went in with. But then, we also took a step back and sort of say, okay, can we actually rethink our investment strategy from an emerging media perspective? And that's where we really doubled down on OTT, connected TV, as well as addressable TV. And much like Cadillac, we've pretty much nailed that down. And I think we're probably one of the few most advanced, connected TV advertisers in healthcare.
So Jason, you're now head of market intelligence, which officially makes you the smartest guy in this room as it relates to network TV and the upfront and CTV and everything else. I know this is ridiculously early for you to start making predictions, but how many of your clients now would fall into Ivan's category of rethinking the whole inventory option?
So there's this idea that I thought I came up with that I thought was original, called temporary permanence. And so once I Googled it, I realized it's a Buddhist philosophy, and it speaks very well to what's happening, coming into and out of COVID, which is, marketers and clients have made different decisions based on the moment in time that was temporary. But as time wore on, these moments and these decisions became more permanent. And the idea of that Buddha represents is that you cannot move that needle back the other direction. It's becoming more and more permanent as time goes on. So, to what the points that were made before about Cadillac by Ivan is that CTV and liquidity and all of these things that were perhaps temporary or would have been temporary had the pandemic lasted for 2 months or 3 months, whatever it may be, have now officially become permanent ways that marketers market. So my feeling is that the largest advertisers will continue to invest in the upfront because it's no longer a higher order objective the way you described it before. General Motors would go out to the program meetings. It's become a tactic of how to procure media at a lower price, take some risks on some programs. Because I think I read somewhere, I think it might have been in one of your posts, that 70% of people are just buying on impressions. They're not buying programs anymore. So it's a tactic that the largest clients will maintain. But smaller clients will be looking for different ways to approach the market. The upfront will be part of it, but scatter, CTV, OTT, go through the entire marketing funnel will drive those decisions.
Yeah, it's a risk benefit analysis at this point, right? It's just a math that you have to do and kind of say, hey, look, can I take on this risk or not? And
the ultimate risk is obviously a scatter market going against you. And I think a lot of us lived through that over the last 12 months. Scatter market's getting stronger than we ever could possibly imagine. A part of it is driven by, obviously the fall off in ratings that we've seen over the last 10 years. I mean, it's not a secret. Part of it is, that the networks have decided to put their best programs on either on Peacock or Paramount Plus, whatever it may be. And they're driving the market away from linear because it's more profitable to put it on streaming services.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. Buddhism, whether we're going to have the elections. So you know,
Oh,
this,
it's not every day I quote Buddha, to be fair.
I'm sorry?
It's not every day I quote Buddha. Usually I'm looking for a rabbi, but
Okay. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, with cable TV, the analogy I gave earlier, there was a lot of reticence to embrace it early on by the big network buyers and the agencies and the clients. And it took some catalyst. So it was Ted Bates' 5% solution. I think that really got cable on base. It was just a research thesis and people started jumping in and it grew and it grew. So was COVID that watershed for CTV, ATV, and the acronym TV marketplace? So you're saying it's permanent now, it's baked in.
it's permanent, but I don't think it's the watershed. I think, you know, we've been talking about this and we were talking about addressable, I don't know how many dishes years. And when did we start doing dish addressable? 20 years ago? How long ago was it? But it's, you know,
Yeah, test beds.
yeah. So I don't think it's, you know, clients were keenly aware of CTV and OTT. I think the issue that drove the market was not COVID. I think it was the audience participation in CTV.
But if I had Cadillac's chart correctly, a third of their inventory is now addressable.
Yeah, so I was saying that I don't want to speak to what Cadillac is doing. That, you know, we've seen this. We've other auto manufacturers that we work with. You know, addressable for these brands makes a lot of sense. If you have a $90,000 or $80,000 vehicle, you know, you want to find your market. If you're an advertiser who is available on every shelf in every store in every country, in every part of the country, you know, a linear strategy that's cheaper, you know, significantly cheaper, will probably drive better results.
Okay, so I want to try and simplify this discussion because we could go all over the place. But the bottom line here is we're supposed to talk about how this is going to impact forward buying. Let's not call it the network upfront. So you have many more options now. So I'm going to guess that a lot of your CTV is being bought programmatically, not through direct human negotiations.
You know, it's IOs. It's across the board. We have IO deals.
Right.
We have historical deals. We obviously have programmatic deals. Yeah.
But if you, and that's for you too, Ivan. Is it a lot of it being done technologically, or is it human negotiation?
It's programmatic for the most part, but you know, usually we need pre-negotiation just to qualify the partners if
Sure.
we want to work and if they're actually going to be as transparent as we want them to be.
Okay, so there's a vetting process, but once you move into that domain, is there any need to do forward buying? I mean, there's always going to be a supply. You're buying it in real time.
You know, for CTV,
Well,
or I mean, I think yes and yes. I think, you know, we're still understanding the amount of inventory that's actually available on CTV. You know, I think somebody mentioned transparency before. The market is not transparent. Nobody can count the house, and when you can't count the house, it creates a little bit of fear in the market because you don't know when the end will come. And I was talking to a vendor this morning, and he's getting close to sellout for fourth quarter, and you know, understanding, you know, a marketplace is driven by sellout, and if there's available inventory across the board, yeah, you go into an auction model and you buy as cheaply as you can. But in the linear world, that's never, you know, there's no world that we live in where ratings are ever going to go up, except for possibly NFL. So yes, they'll be upfront buying.
So we have two worlds colliding. We had two worlds colliding in the 80s when cable came along, when teletext and videotext and everything else. What is fundamentally different now? We have the currency in effect blowing itself up in the next year with Nielsen 1. We don't even know what that really is yet. You have all these alternative measures. We just heard people talking about ACR and now smart speakers in the home, listening to everything. And we can identify down to the household level. So we know who these people really are now through companies like TransUnion and others. So why are we not able to count the house when we have all this rich data available? Why, in effect, isn't that better than linear TV measurement?
Well, I think it's better, right? And, you know, it's part of, you know, our OTT investment is really sort of like what made us double down was first we found, you know, radio dollars sitting around, you know, back in the days when COVID hit, right? Where we said, look, the overall mileage driven has declined. There's no point in advertising in radio as much as we did. So we put those dollars into an OTT test. Then we started chipping away from TV, linear TV, and other channels to actually fund OTT. And now it's a separate line item. But you know, in general, what was the question again? Sorry.
Oh, just it seems like this old world of linear TV buying was based on the supply of gross rating points,
Right.
which were just panel estimates that are now being blown up anyway, because Nielsen's moving to a cross measurement thing. And we have so much richer data available down to the household level.
Yeah, and we actually do, and that's part of our vetting process. Is we just had a bunch of conversations this morning. We are not going to support a vendor that is not as transparent to the point that we are actually getting the log level data, right? Compared to data we're actually getting from linear TV, there is 90 days maturation that we need to wait for, and the overall attribution there is much lengthier and much more complex and relies on model data. This way, there's nothing to model. It's almost a one-to-one relationship. There's no fuzzy matching. It's pretty much detrimental. Deterministic, and therefore, it is easier for us to say, hey, look, every dollar I'm spending, there is an accounted efficiency and effectiveness to it. Unlike TV, right? TV is always going to remain more as a brain play to begin with, and that's probably where it's headed. With what just Jason said, like, look, there's always going to be 500 Fortune 500 companies that are actually supporting upfront buys, not only because they will do it anyway, they would want to mitigate their risk from a cost perspective, but also I would say that the inventory in the upfront buy is going to decrease. And if it does decrease, the CPMs are going up. So effectively, the net result is the TV stations, the TV holding companies will actually keep their revenues intact for the next couple of years.
I think to that point, you mentioned the amount of advertisers that are buying national television versus the amount, if you think about how many advertisers are on Facebook, it's a completely
10 million.
Yeah, it's a completely different world. So that if you want to be a linear advertiser, if you're selling linear ads, your pool of clients is getting smaller, because if you didn't start out on linear, it takes a while to get there, and then you get sticker price, and all points that Ivan makes about attribution and metrics for methodology to count the house are very different. So demand on the linear side has been relatively flat in terms of real revenue. I mean, it's not growing dramatically. I think it's up maybe 1 or 2 points. The issue is supply, and that's what's driving CPMs, and that's what's driving advertisers crazy. It's the more for less for more, that argument. And that's what fundamentally will, I think, put a dagger into the heart of upfront buying, is when somebody says, okay, I'm not paying you $50 for a 0.3 rating anymore.
So I've heard this argument for 40 years. So my question for you, Jason, is why is it not interchangeable? Why is it looked at in a vacuum that this shrinking network TV supply, it's about audience. You talked about impressions before. It's about the supply of human beings out there. So why are you looking, not you personally, but why is the industry looking at network upfront in isolation or separate from everything else?
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think they are clearly interchangeable in some ways. And there's no plan that's written that says, go buy linear TV and see what happens next. Every plan is written in context of the entire marketplace, whether it's buying social media on Twitter, sponsored by the way, or working with other companies that provide video and or digital display impressions. So there's no I said before, there used to be a higher order of the upfront. The upfront was an objective for clients at some point. This is what we have to accomplish in 2003. We need to do an upfront. Then it became a strategy, and now it's a tactic. And it's one quiver that allows us to go procure inventory, and we're using that to buy it as cheaply as possible. It's not saying if you buy a linear thing, you can't buy CTV. That's not a true statement.
Okay, we have a few more minutes. Let's try and achieve the panel thesis and objective, which is at this ridiculously early stage. Let's figure out what's going to happen with the upfront this year in terms of planning and buying. So you have tight scatter coming into this. We don't know what cancellation options are going to be like for a few weeks for the first quarter, but presumably they're going to hold firm.
I mean, we're looking at a world that's very different than it was, 2 months ago.
Right. We don't know anything.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think, if you look at supply chain woes, I think that's scatter is not nearly as strong as we thought it would be. There are clients who are, who would have invested more into holiday who aren't. I think inflation woes are real for a lot of American consumers, and that may dampen holiday sales as well, which then bleeds into first quarter. So I think the strength of the market will remain because the networks continue to erode, but this is not a demand driven event. And as we get into, what worries me a little bit, and I think Ivan brought it up before, were the elections. You will have the amount of money that's being raised right now for the different elections in 2022 is off the charts,
Right.
and that can implode the third and fourth quarter marketplace for next year. So, go forward, I don't think we're changing our position. Clients who want to invest early should have that opportunity, but we also need to look at the entire landscape and say what makes the most sense to drive business.
Okay.
Yeah, I think upfronts for next year is just gonna blow up based on the
I'm not allowed to
elections.
say that, but you can say that.
Yeah, I don't have your data sources, but I think it's just going to blow up because, when we were, looking at this last year with the elections, the preemptions were just so daunting. And I would say many advertisers that did not get into the upfront, and they could have,
Right.
they will.
And those preemptions were hitting a lot of spot markets that were probably active in. Yeah,
Yes, you'll see local money push up.
Yeah. Right. Okay, do we have time for questions or is it?
Anybody here has a question or wants to argue? Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. My name's Andrew Budkowski from Glued TV. Ivan, you mentioned the CTV is now a line item unto itself. How do you determine where you're going to invest in CTV? How did you go about that process? The platforms, et cetera.
I can go down the Wayfair strategy that Lauren did. It is a complex kind of decisioning approach, but the first thing that we are actually looking with an OTT partner, whether that is a platform or a publisher, is household level transparency, data transparency, right? The reason why we're looking for that is because even though we are highly regulated industry with all the HIPAA regulations looming over us, it is important for us to basically attribute a conversion to a household, right? If we don't see that, then there's literally no measurability in our end to kind of understand, like, hey, is certain platform, certain audience segment, or certain publisher working for us? If we don't have that, then you're kind of like flying blind, and we don't want to fly blind. So that's the first sort of like filtering component. The next one is basically testing successful audience segments into new OTT platforms, right? So we kind of know, like, hey, Crossix is a good customer segment for us. Therefore, we're going to try and test Crossix into a new platform. So we know that Crossix is not the reason why a platform is failing to deliver results. And the other way around, if we are testing a new audience segment, then we're going to start testing with, let's say, Samsung TV, who has been a trusted partner for us, and really sort of gauge, like, hey, look, given that we've been able to generate Samsung TV conversions with the Crossix audiences, is that happening with another segmentation partner or not? If not, then we move along. Does that answer your question?
I mean, just to follow up on that. So for you, Jason, is CTV a day part? Is it part of? Yeah.
I want to call it, it's a medium, it's a day part, it's a part of activation of video. It can be anything you want it to be, but it has to be funded. I mean, we at Havas, I was supposed to say this, I was told to say this, we believe in building meaningful brands through meaningful media. So I don't know, Greg Walsh, if you're listening, I said it. I would like that in my review. But that said, the idea of finding impressions that drive value shouldn't come from a spreadsheet or day part model. These are areas of opportunity. Go fund them, make it work.
Okay. I guess just last question. I start off by pointing out how cable actually ended up benefiting broadcast because it brought new advertisers into the fold. I believe Facebook and Google have done the same by growing up direct-to-consumer brands into mainstream media. Do you think the opportunity with CTV and ATV and programmatic will actually bring new advertisers to the network linear upfront?
Probably not. I don't think so. I think if, the way the differentiation point's going now in linear is if you're 45 plus consumer or advertiser, there's a big, it's a big tent. If you're looking for a target, anything under the age of 45, and you like CTV and that's where your business is, I don't think you'll ever leave there. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, what's supporting the linear economy right now, quite frankly, is pharmaceutical and insurance. Those two are the, and then it will be politicals in third and fourth quarter. So it's, there is a Mason-Dixon line being drawn, and the networks are supporting that by moving anything that's younger skewing onto the streaming services and leaving things that perform older onto the linear base.
All right, so come back for part 2 of this conversation when Jason's on our Outfront panel in April in New York, hopefully. And I want to thank both Ivan and Jason for giving us an early look on what may or may not happen with the Upfront. I don't know. Thank you.